America, bonjour, hi Canada, happy Holy Thursday to you. I am in Studio West for two more weeks of teaching, then I head back to the Beltway. I begin, of course, by reviewing the biggest story in America, which unfortunately is the sham case. It's no longer even deserving of the adjective threadbare or thin or shaky or faulty. It's an abomination legally. And when you've lost Politico, okay, let me review some of the headlines first of all. Trump charges bring doubts, hopes, and uncertainty in both parties. That's a good way of not talking about it, New York Times. Trump's criminal case in the New York may collide with 2024 campaign. It already has, which is why it's such an assault on everybody, as well as Donald Trump, from the Washington Post. While pinning Trump case to campaign laws, reports The Hill, Bragg eyes a backup plan. Yeah, like this missile. And then from Politico, of all places, opinion, of course, it's not a news story, an opinion story by a fellow named Renato Mariotta, who is the legal affairs columnist for Politico, former federal prosecutor. The gaping hole in the middle of the Trump indictment. That gaping hole was discussed yesterday by me and by Andrew McCarthy and by Senator Cotton. It's a Star Chamber-like refusal to name the law under which Trump is being charged. All of the falsification of records are misdemeanors that are barred by the statute of limitations unless there's a felony. No felony was named that bootstraps them into felony status and revives them, resurrects them on this Easter weekend from the grave of the statute of limitations. It's nonsense, all right? It's an assault on the due process of Donald Trump and on the country, and everyone has concluded that. In fact, let me ask Generalissimo. Generalissimo, you did all the audio today because I've been busy, so busy working.
Right.
Any audio where anyone defends this thing?
No. The thing that was fascinating to me as I was floating around looking for stuff is even on places like CNN, they had their legal analysts, and it didn't matter who the analyst was. They were looking at it going, yeah, this is actually kind of underwhelming. There's really not a lot here.
That is an insult to underwhelming. All right, I'm going to play some of those clips. But first, you're looking pretty skinny.
Well,
thanks to myphdweightloss.com.
Very much so.
864-644-1900. Let me go back to the headlines. I'm going to play those CNN clips in a second. The latest in the war. French and Chinese leaders meet amid tensions. Okay, so Macron has gone to Beijing. You notice who's playing the center stage role here? General Secretary Xi Jinping, because nobody wants to meet with Biden because the president is infirm. Saudi Iranian foreign ministers agreed to resume flights after Beijing meeting. Oh, great. What meeting is that? The one that's not being reported on because of this idiocy in Manhattan. Iran-Saudi foreign ministers meet in China. They vow to restore security and stability. I'm just astonished. UAE, our strongest ally along with Israel in the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates, meeting with Iran. This is what happens with an infirm president. Is your allies say, we can't count on this guy. We can't count on this team. Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, nah. And they begin to make deals with the enemy. And Beijing emerges. Terrible day. It's Holy Thursday. Good Friday is to morning. Sunday's coming. But the Maryland Attorney General released a report that chronicles the Baltimore Archdiocese very tragic and criminal decades of sex abuse by clergy. And I think under the penumbra of McCarrick, who was disgraced and should be in jail, and then Wuerl, the cardinals in D.C., the Baltimore Cardinal, I don't know if they ever talked about it at that level, but there are 600 victims from the mid-1940s to 2002. 600 people in Baltimore. We're just finding out about it. What did they not get? Why didn't they call Archbishop Chaput, who got sent down? I mean, he had to clean up Denver, he had to clean up Philadelphia, he got sent down to clean up the Legion of Christ. Benedict was on this. Francis has never been on this. And if anyone wants to send me a link that proves me wrong, by all means do so. I do not understand how we can still be getting the old regime exposed and the criminals jailed and the victims healed and recompensed in 2023. I don't get it. And a grief for the Catholic Church, as it will, and on Good Friday, it should be on everyone's mind tomorrow. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, the Ted Lasso of talk radio. And my most Ted Lasso-y guest is Jim Talent. The former senator from Missouri does put an emphasis on kindness, graciousness, and not losing his temper. He's like Ted Lasso. Hello, Senator. How are you?
Well, I'm fine. I'm going to take that as a compliment, you. I don't know if you intended it as one, but
Oh, I do. I call myself the Ted Lasso of talk radio because I always try and stay kind, courteous, and observant of everyone and trying to be gracious to them. But I'm mad at Alvin Bragg. And that's what I think. I think Ted's going to go off at some point in this season, which they've worked hard to make R-rated, which is unfortunate. What do you make? You're a fine lawyer. What do you make of what DA Bragg did?
Well, it's a sign. It's evidence of the collapse of the prosecutorial function in many of our cities. I mean, as you know, the basic function of a prosecutor is to prosecute the guilty and protect the innocent, right? And what these prosecutors are doing is prosecuting the innocent and protecting the guilty. And as a result, crime, of course, is surging in New York. And, I have to say, this is a terrible injustice to Trump. He's going to get exonerated at some point, right? I mean, the odds on that are very high. But there are lives being shattered in New York every day because of Alvin Bragg, and we're not going to be able to put those back together again.
Well observed. By the way, they're spending an enormous amount of money and prosecutorial bandwidth on a nonsense case. Now, Jim, the Sixth Amendment guarantees every defendant in every courtroom, and that is a criminal courtroom, that they be informed of the charges against them. It is basic. It is foundational. I waited and waited and waited to see the indictment and the statement of facts. And I know what all the misdemeanors or previous misdemeanors were. It's not news. 34 of them, it's the same set of facts. But the bootstrapping element, the underlying felony that resurrects the statute of limitations barred misdemeanor isn't there. Have you seen anyone from the left defend this indictment?
No. And even my friends that I talk to, well, part of the difficulty is they don't understand it. Now, we're dealing here with a prosecutor who doesn't believe in the norms of the institution that he's supposed to represent, right? In other words, he thinks that the criminals are the victims of an unjust system, right? And that the rest of us are the ones who are victimizing them, okay? Now, on top of that, he's also incompetent. So he waits 6 years to bring a case, allows the statute to run, and then brings a case that even his political allies are looking at and are cringing over, right? So we have a combination here, a lack of faithfulness and also a lack of competence. And by the way, that's heavily represented. We have the same problem in St. Louis City here.
I didn't know. Do you have a Soros prosecutor there?
Kim Gardner, yeah, and the Attorney General. We don't have a system in Missouri where the governor can remove a prosecutor. So the state Attorney General here has filed a quo warranto against her, which is really not the right vehicle for, the courts are going to decide whether it can be used for those purposes. But we have people drag racing in major arteries in the city of St. Louis. I mean, it's just, I don't want to hijack your interview, but this is a problem all over the country, and it's manifesting.
A young tech entrepreneur was stabbed to death. 43-year-old brilliant guy, helped founded Square in San Francisco, stabbed to death 2 nights ago. And every day near Capitol Hill, there's a carjacking. Not every day, but often. The collapse of law and order. And now we've elected a quote, progressive in Chicago. And again, it's usually because of the money. It's usually because the public employee unions want a lefty who will give them better pension benefits. That's usually what's driving these elections.
Right. And I think another problem in the cities is that people feel like, and I understand why they feel it, voters feel like, look, it doesn't make any difference who we vote for, because we pretty much get the same thing all the time. And so they don't turn out. I mean, these are very low turnout elections relative to the importance of them. There's a cynicism about the process, which is understandable. I mean, you look at this prosecution of Trump, and everybody knows this is a joke. And so why go to the polls? So it's a number of things. But eventually there's going to be electoral consequences, and that's when it will stop. You and I have.
Let me ask you about those electoral consequences. I think it's too early for me to have any opinion on the Republican nomination, but do you think the indictment of the former president sufficiently energizes Republicans upset with the double standard that it discourages other people from entering the race beyond Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy?
Oh, no, I really don't, Hugh. I mean, we have a long way to go in the primary process. And I'll tell you, it's until we have the other candidates in the field, and I think those who are planning to run are not going to be deterred by this. We have an opportunity to see them in debates, and Republican voters can judge. I wouldn't draw any inferences. I'm getting some calls of people who are asking me that question. I don't think this is going to affect that. I do think people are rallying around Donald Trump now, and they should, because if this is an unjust prosecution, at best the process is going to be the punishment for him. In other words, I think he's going to get exonerated, but it should never have been brought. And it's just another example.
It is a horrific stain on the rule of law, and I expect the left to step up at some point and admit that. Jim Talent on Twitter from the Bipartisan Policy Center. Thank you, Senator. Happy Easter to you, and I'll talk to you next week. I'm joined by Fox anchor of Special Report, Bret Baier. Good morning, Bret. Happy Easter to you.
Morning. Happy Easter, Hugh.
Now, I am always not surprised to learn some things that you are even-handed, fair, and balanced, but I am always surprised at your capacity. I see yesterday that you are launching a graphic novel series, The History Club, for kids. And I am very encouraged by it because I got 5 grandchildren. They're all the ones that can read are readers, and they will eat this up. Tell me about The History Club.
Oh, man, it's so much fun. You know, I've been really into the history kick, as you know, and I've had the series, the 3-day series, and now To Rescue the Republic, and coming up this fall To Rescue the Constitution, about the Constitutional Convention. And I've really gotten into that. But the reason I did it all was to have books that are readable to our generation and younger, but really hit young kids, because I think that there's a lack of history understanding. And I tried in my first series of books to kind of have young reader editions, and that worked a little bit, but I think that really to hit kids, you got to do something that kids would read on their own.
Bret, and, I've got an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, The Scholar and The Flash, and they both are always with a nose in the book, and they love things like Diary of a Wimpy Kid. They love all the Harry Potter. They love all of that, but they've run out of stuff, frankly, and they've never had the kind of books I grew up with, which were fictionalized accounts of the young adults in American history.
Exactly. So Rush Limbaugh did it really, really well with his Rush Revere series, and I read that. My kids loved it, and I thought, is there a way to do something different, but that hits this next generation? So we came up with the History Club, and I teamed up with a great illustrator, and this is a story about kids that are in a history club that is in contests about history, and they are visited by this time traveler who needs help to battle this evil villain, Time Twister, and he's trying to change events in history. And you don't know why, but he's trying to screw up events in history, and they kind of have to put things back together. And so they go back through time, and this one deals with Alexander Hamilton, and it bounces around in history, but all of it is rooted in real historical fact, and it's kind of in the graphic novel, but it's in a way that's really readable. And
I salute you. I cannot wait to give these to my grandkids. I've been waiting for something like this, and congratulations. I don't want to give your illustrator no credit, but it really does depend on the story. You can have wonderful illustrations, but if you haven't got the story down, it ain't going to work. So good luck on the story. How many do you plan?
You know, I don't know. We kind of started this process. I know we get 2 definitely in the hopper. This is the first one. And, you know, if it takes off, who knows? It could be a bigger thing.
Just a thought, Bret. Just a thought. Yeah. I'm finishing the novel Tomorrow After Tomorrow After Tomorrow, which is a real reveal on the millennials and what gaming has done to their understanding of time and story, because they spend thousands of hours on games. And I'm not decrying that. I'm just saying it's a fact of life. But how they view the world is different. And graphic novels, they see everything in pictures. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I know. And I test drove it with my kids, and they thought it was really cool. So I said, wait a second, they think it's cool? You know, and so I think it's going to work.
Is there a video game lurking in the background here?
There could be. There could be a cartoon. There could be a video game. I mean, I'm really excited about it. And
All
the
right.
best part about it is that it's rooted in like actual real history. It's not fake stuff.
Let's get to the hard news. The Masters
Yes.
begins today.
Yeah.
Jason Kokrak is always my favorite of Warren, Ohio. I like to tell people we played on the same golf team, only 40 years apart. And so Jason has not won a major. I'm hoping it's this weekend. What do you think? Who's the favorite?
Well, I tell you what, he hits it a long way.
Yes, he does.
I like Jason Day this week. I like Jordan Spieth, but my heart goes with Rory McIlroy because, boy, I'd love to just see him win the Grand Slam, and he's playing great. So if he can get out of his head and just have fun this week, hopefully he scores well.
Has it occurred often on Easter weekend?
It's rare. I mean, it's every other kind of 3 years. I've been down there on Easter weekend. Unfortunately, I can't get down this year, but it's just a special week, and even non-golfers get into it, which is really fun.
Oh yeah,
I have a pool with my family. They're all golfers. My wife, not really, but we just did it this morning. You know, we picked 4 golfers, and it'll be fun.
Did anyone take Jason?
Yeah, Kokrak?
Okay.
No, Jason Day.
No, that's too bad. You've been warned. Now let's get to the really, really hard news. The center of the Bragg indictment is empty. The underlying felony is not there. The Sixth Amendment guarantees defendants the right to know what the charges and accusations are against them. The DA gave a rambling press conference, but it's not in the papers. That's why I believe even the lefties I follow, like Preet and Neil Katyal, and I listen to, they won't touch this case, Bret. There's a Grand Canyon in the middle. Is that becoming obvious to everyone?
I think it is. I mean, you listen to Andrew McCabe and all of these folks on TV saying, the there is not there. It will have to be there in the Bill of Particulars, but it really is a little bit of thin gruel. That said, as you know, it's the start of an avalanche of legal activity for the former president, and I don't think it's going to stop. I think the fact that this one happened first gives him more ammo, and you heard that in that speech, to talk about all of those things that are coming down the track, some of them more potent legally than this by far.
I've got a great friend, Jan Janura, who has a phrase that I've stolen. I'm a ready, aim, fire guy. So I held fire on Bragg until after I could read the statement of facts and the indictment. I'm not going to talk up or down the Georgia proceedings or Jack Smith proceeding because I don't know and nobody knows.
Yes.
But I do know that this indictment ought to be dismissed. Andrew McCarthy and I spent 30 minutes talking about it yesterday. The key here is the dog that didn't bark, the charge not named, and the lefties not defending it. So can you find anyone to come on special report to say, yeah, this makes sense. This is really a valid resurrection of these misdemeanors that are 7 years old?
I have not yet, and I'm not searching for it because you're not. It's like a needle in a haystack. I think there's a lot of experts on both sides of the aisle who say it's not there yet, and they'd like to see what else Bragg thinks. He said in the news conference he didn't have to put it in this paper, but when you go forward with something this big, this monumental, and you bring in a former president and arrest him, boy, it seems like you should lay it all out. And to your point, the Sixth Amendment says you have to. The Sixth
Amendment, it's to me, it's not an option. And Andy McCarthy had a wonderful phrase, Bret. They ought to be up under the judge's toes yesterday, bringing the motion to dismiss. But I saw Joe Tacopina, who I gather is going to be the principal talking head for the Trump legal team, saying, expect a motion in July. I think that's nuts, but
yeah, it seems like a long time. And boy, this timeline with December, the decision on the motions, and then January, the start of a trial potentially. I mean, what else is happening in January? Well, let's see. Iowa caucuses, New Hampshire primary. I think it's really tough to believe that this is all going to go forward, but you never know. Jonathan Turley said that Bragg may be betting that this judge says, look, we dressed up. Why not go to the dance? And I don't know if that's going to happen.
All right, last question, Bret. I asked this of Jim Talent last hour, and I've been asked it by lots of people. Will any would-be presidential candidate now pause because of the surge in sympathy for what appears to most people on the center right as a political prosecution for Trump? I don't think so. Jim Talent didn't think so. What do you hear?
Well, I don't think that it'll stop them from moving forward to run, but But if they were planning on a launch in the next week or two, I think they're going to wait for the hurricane to pass. And, after 2 weeks of coverage, maybe come out and say, I'm the candidate that's going to give you Trump policies, but not the chaos and other things. I assume that that's going to happen. You already have Asa Hutchinson, former Arkansas governor, and, is talking that way, but I think there are others who will try to get on that bandwagon.
I agree. A pause for peace. That's what's going to happen. Bret Baier, happy Easter to you and all the Bears. Congratulations on the History Club. And people should follow Bret on Twitter, and you'll find the art graphic there. It looks fabulous, and you can pre-order it now. Bret Baier, thank you, my friend. Have a great special report tonight.